Hello everyone, we jumped into the next chapter, that's layer options or blending options, and also we learned a lot in the previous videos. Or you can double click in the layer, then a window will open that's layer style or blending options or layer options, anything you can call. In the bottom of that box you can see that is the option for drop shadow. Click there and enable the drop shadow effect. As I shown in the previous example, especially in blending modes, we did a lot of tutorials with the drop shadow. I knew you were eagerly waiting for the full documentation of drop shadow. We can do that now. In this section we are creating all the terms that starting from blending modes, opacity, then ending at contour, then look at that contour, then noise, and the rest of everything. So which means we are covering everything, every single thing. And also we are going to learn making shadow of a chair, then cap, then making attractive drop shadow effects for text, and we are discussing something in this section, in the drop shadow section. So let me begin with what are drop shadow used for. One of the most challenging tasks in designing is creating depth based on 2D objects. It takes practice to create a realistic shadow. Photoshop offers a simple way to add drop shadows as layer styles with a set of parameters for us to play with. So let me introduce the structure of the drop shadow window, starting from blend modes. This is a style in which the shadow will blend with the background. Multiply is the default one. So here you can see that the multiply is the default blend mode. We discussed multiply in the blending options. It does the same operation here also. Shadows are not always pitch black, so we have the ability to change the tint. So here in the right side you can select the colors, whatever color you want. You can go with white, blue, or anything. I'm gonna select the dark color, that's quite better. And the next thing is given is the opacity. We also discussed about opacity. It also does the same operation. Opacity dictates the transparency of the overall drop shadow. The higher opacity, so let's change the distance and the size and the spread of the shadow. So the higher the opacity, here you can see, the higher the opacity, darker the shadow will appear. So decreasing the opacity will make the shadow more transparent. And also here you can see a preview. Look at that. Let me show you that. When I change the color to black color, it changes the opacity, it controls the opacity. So here in the right side you can see the preview of the operation of the drop shadow, or whatever you change here it will affect, or you can see the preview of your changes here. Then the next is the angle. So the next thing is I'm going to show you the angle. The angle determines the light source and dictates where the drop shadow will be placed. Below on the left, the light is being generated from the bottom light, making the shadow fall on the top left. On the right hand side object, the light is being generated from the top left, making the shadow fall on the bottom right. In newer versions of Adobe Photoshop, you can manually move the shadow around the main object. So look at that. When I change the angle, the shadow rotates. It rotates 180 degrees. This is really useful. Some images or some text need special angle shadows, so it affects the lighting, where the lighting is coming, where the light is coming, so we can adjust the shadow angle or shadow position. So global light is a light angle for the entire document. As long as it is checked, it will use the same angle for any other styles you are adding. Uncheck if you want to change the angle independently from other styles. Then the next thing is distance. So distance settings move the shadow further from or closer to the object. Look at that. Look at that. It changes. In newer versions of Adobe Photoshop, you have the ability to click and move this shadow around. Then the next thing is listed here is spread. So what is spread? The spread controls how far the drop shadow spreads. This can make the shadow look more intense and dense. Use this setting along with the size to better control the look. So the next is the size. So what is the size? Size dictates the softness of the drop shadow. We can create a very crisp, hard edges shadow or a soft, diffused one. So this will greatly affect the illusion of the light source. Then the next is contour. The contour determines the shape of the drop shadow. As a default, linear creates a regular shadow. That's the first one, linear. Then rest of settings are useful when working with materials that have reflective surfaces. These effects will depend greatly on the parameters covered above. I'm going to change it to cone. So look at that change, it happened. Linear is like this, then cone changed like this, then cone. Asymmetrical changed like this. Then we have a lot of cone shapes, cone variants, then Gaussian, then half round, then log. Look at that, we have a bunch of. Then valley, we have a lot of things available. The normal one is linear. We can use in different situations. Then in the right side you can see there is an anti-aliased box. So anti-aliasing settings to help smooth out the edges of the shadow. It's best to always have it checked, but be aware that the change will be very minor. It's very minute. Then the last thing is shown here is noise. What is noise? We can increase the size and spread. Then let's check it out. What is noise? This is noise. Noise controls quality of the shadow. Depending on the percentage you use, you can create a smooth shadow by decreasing the noise or grungy shadow by increasing the smoothness. This is useful when you are creating shadows over rough surfaces and you need a gritty texture. Look at that. Then we can read this one is layer knocks out drop shadow. What is this thing? If you have transparent objects on top of the shadow, this option stops or allows the shadow to show through the object. This option works with the fill option on the layers panel. So what we learned, the opacity versus fill comparison. The fill will not affect the blending options. Is it right? Yes. So let's actually I enable this or I'll check the layer knocks out drop shadow, then click OK. Let's change the fill value to 0. So the text is gonna transparent or it's completely white or it's transparent. Then we can increase the fill value. Then we can go to the drop shadow, then uncheck the layer knocks out drop shadow. So let's check out what will happen. Then again it dropped down. So look at that, there is no transparency. The transparent part also fill with the blend option or the drop shadow. So that is the use of the layer knocks out drop shadow. That is layer knocks out drop shadow. Look at that, the difference. Then the last section or last thing, make default and rest to reset to default. So what is that? If you would like to use the current active setting, you can click make default. If I click the make default, it will be the default setting. Then use the reset to default button and to go back to the last saved setting. So the previous setting, that is the rest to default. This allows you to experiment and reload custom default settings if you want to start over. So if you are using newer Adobe Photoshop CC, you will have the ability to add multiple instances of the same layer styles to a single layer. This is great if you are creating complicated effects that require more than one. In the layer style option window, head over to the left menu, that's here. You will notice a plus button. Look at that, this one is a plus button. To the right of the drop shadow option, this allows you to add multiple drop shadow styles without getting out of the option window. We can add multiple drop shadows. You can add up to 10 layer styles on a single layer, and also you can delete this by select that and then click the delete. So we covered every single term of the drop shadow, so never forget this. This is really important for your Photoshop career or Photoshop learning. So I hope everything clear. Okay, now we are moving to the practical sections. How we can utilize this drop shadow effect in our daily life editing for creative making and designing. Thank you.